They did not just steal my future, they stole my past. They thought they had me, but they forgot about my mother's blueprints, and they definitely forgot about her daughter's fury. When you strip someone of everything, you only give them the freedom to take it all back. This is not a story about forgiveness. This is a story about settling accounts. My name is Eliza Grant. For 10 years, I was the head of design for Prescott Heritage Properties, and tonight, the crystal chandeliers of the Boston Ballroom felt like they were hanging just for me. This was the annual company gala, the glittering peak of the season. But this year was different. This was our coronation. The air was thick with the scent of white roses and old money. I smoothed the front of my emerald silk gown, my gaze fixed on my husband, Mark Prescott. He stood near the stage, radiating confidence, a glass of champagne in his hand, looking every inch the heir apparent. Tonight, he was finally going to be named the new CEO. His father, Arthur Prescott, the formidable chairman of the board, was finally stepping back. And we were stepping up. My heart was thrumming with a nervous, triumphant energy. I had just completed my own masterpiece, the project that had consumed me for the past 18 months, the restoration of Willow Creek Manor. It was a forgotten historic landmark, a sprawling stone mansion I had poured my soul into rebuilding. It was my passion project, my proof of concept, and Mark and I had agreed. Our dream home. The lights dimmed. The chatter of the city's elite died down. Arthur Prescott, a man whose presence could freeze a river, walked to the podium. His silver hair seemed to catch the light. His eyes, cold and blue, scanned the crowd and paused, finding me. I smiled, a genuine, proud smile. For him, for Mark, for us. "Good evening." His voice boomed, filling the vast space. "We are here to celebrate success. To celebrate vision." He spoke at length about the company's unwavering growth. And then, he turned his attention to my work. This year, our greatest achievement is the complete restoration of Willow Creek Manor, a project led by our very own head of design, Eliza Grant. A warm spotlight found me. I stood, my cheeks flushing, as polite applause rippled through the room. Mark winked at me from his position by the stage. I felt a wave of relief. "Eliza's work is a testament to the Prescott standard," Arthur continued, his voice smooth. "Her tireless dedication has set the stage for our new chapter." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "And it is my distinct honor to announce the new chief executive officer who will lead us into that future, my daughter, Sophia Prescott." The spotlight swung off me, slamming onto Sophia, who was standing right next to Mark. The air left my lungs in a silent whoosh. Sophia, his sister. She worked in marketing. She was 28. The applause was hesitant, confused. I saw several investors exchange bewildered glances before I could even process the shock. Mark stepped forward, taking the microphone from his father. He was laughing, a broad, bright, public laugh. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. "Thank you, Dad," Mark said, his voice slick and practiced, booming over the speakers. "We are all so proud of Sophia. Truly, this entire celebration is all for her." He turned, and his eyes found me across the crowded floor. They were not the eyes of the man I loved. They were the eyes of a stranger, cold and amused. And in that same spirit of new beginnings, I have one more announcement. Eliza and I will be formally separating. Our priorities, it seems, have diverged. A collective gasp. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes turning, staring, dissecting me. Separating. We had argued, yes, the stress of the project had been immense, but this Sophia, basking in her newfound glory, stepped up to the microphone, her smile a slash of red lipstick. "And as my first act as CEO, I am just so thrilled to finally move into my new home, Willow Creek Manor." Mark put his arm around her shoulder, a gesture of pure triumph. It was always a gift for you, Soph, he said, his voice loud enough for the microphone to catch. Sophia's gaze locked onto mine. The entire room, the investors, the city council members, my colleagues, all watched as she delivered the final, precise cut. Thank you for getting it move-in ready, sister-in-law. The silence was a roaring in my ears. I was naked, flayed open under the glare of 1,000 eyes. I had not just lost my husband, I had lost my job, my home, my future, all in the space of 30 seconds. I must have stumbled, because suddenly a hand was on my elbow, but it was not Mark. It was not a friend offering comfort. It was a man in a black suit with a discreet earpiece, one of the event's security staff. Ms. Grant, he said, his voice polite but firm. If you will come with me? He was not asking. He was steering me. This ghost in an emerald gown, away from the stage, past the stunned faces, through the gilded lobby, and out into the cold Boston night. As the heavy doors of the hotel clicked shut behind us, he pressed a simple cardboard banker's box into my hands. Your personal effects, he said, without emotion. I looked inside. My favorite drafting pen. A framed photo of Mark and me from our wedding, now face down. My desk calendar. They had cleared my office before I even arrived at the party. This was not a divorce. It was an execution. The shock held me rigid for only a moment. A frozen statue in emerald silk, clutching a cardboard box on a cold sidewalk. Then the numbness shattered, replaced by a frantic, icy clarity. This was a mistake. A grotesque, public misunderstanding. I had to get to Mark. I had to get to my office. I did not bother with the valet. I ran, my heels sinking into the grass divider, toward the Prescott Tower, the headquarters, the building whose new atrium I had personally redesigned just 2 years prior. It was nearly midnight, but the executive floors were always accessible to me. I was the head of design. The marble lobby was empty. The security guard at the main desk looked up, startled to see me. I did not stop. I walked straight to the private executive elevator bank, my heels clicking an angry rhythm on the stone. I held my access card to the sensor. The light flashed red. A flat, impersonal buzz. Access denied. I tried again. Red. Buzz. What? I whispered. I swiped it a third time. Fast. Angry. Red. Ma'am. The lobby guard was approaching slowly. Can I help you? My card? I said, my voice shaking. It is not working. This is Eliza Grant. I am head of design. He looked uncomfortable. Ms. Grant, we received a notification. Your access has been revoked. Revoked. The word felt like a slap. I still had the box of my things in my other hand. The purge was already complete. I stumbled back out into the night, the cold hitting me. My car. I had to get my car and go to Willow Creek. I would confront Mark there. I hurried to the parking garage, my mind racing. I reached the automated payment kiosk. I pulled out my wallet, shoving in the company American Express. Card declined. My breath hitched. I tried my company Visa. Card declined. My company gas card. Declined. They had cut everything. My phone. I ripped it from my clutch, my hands trembling so hard I could barely type the passcode. I pulled up my email. The app refreshed. There, at the top, was an email from Human Resources. The timestamp was 9:05 p.m. It had been sent while I was sipping champagne, waiting for my husband's speech. Subject: immediate termination of employment. Dear Ms. Grant, the automated text read, this email serves as formal notification of the immediate termination of your contract with Prescott Heritage Properties due to gross misconduct and a severe breach of contract. Gross misconduct. I was the one who had just been publicly humiliated. I scrolled through my contacts. David Foster, our personal banker, a man Mark called a family friend, who had been at our wedding. I called his private cell number. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. Hi, David, this is Eliza. Eliza Grant. Something is terribly wrong. It is an emergency. Please call me the second you get this. My fingers flew to my banking app, the joint savings account, the one we were using for the final furnishings at Willow Creek, the account where I had deposited the inheritance from my mother. I logged in. The screen loaded. Joint savings account Mark Prescott and Eliza Grant. Available balance $0.00. He had taken it all. He had drained it. Every last cent. I was standing in a concrete parking garage in a $3,000 gown, holding a box of office trinkets, and I had nothing. But I still had the car. A company-leased Audi. I threw the box onto the passenger seat and drove. I broke every speed limit getting out of the city, heading for the suburbs, heading for Willow Creek. My home. My home. When I arrived, the 20-foot iron gates I had commissioned were closed. The lights of the manor blazed against the night sky, and I could hear music. Loud, thumping, celebratory music. I got out of the car and ran to the new security panel I had approved just last week. I typed in our code. Invalid code. I tried Mark's birthday. Invalid. My birthday. Invalid. No, 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 I muttered, pounding my fist on the metal box. I could hear laughter from the terrace. Sophia's sharp, braying laugh. She was having a party, a housewarming. "Let me in," I screamed, my voice raw. "This is my house!" Headlights blinded me, sweeping in from the access road. A black security SUV. 2 large men in private uniforms stepped out. "Ma'am, you need to step away from the gate," the first one said, his hand resting near his belt. "I am Eliza Grant. This is my house. I live here. This is the private property of Ms. Sophia Prescott," the second man said, his voice flat. "We have been instructed to warn you for trespassing. If you do not return to your vehicle and leave immediately, we will have you arrested." Trespassing. I backed away, the gravel cutting into the thin soles of my shoes. I got back into the Audi, my entire body numb. I was locked out. Of my life. My phone buzzed on the console. A new text message, an unknown number. It contained only 9 words. "They are coming for the car. Get out of the city." My blood turned to ice. This was not a divorce. This was a corporate purge. They were not just leaving me, they were erasing me. They were treating me like an enemy insurgent. I looked at the fuel gauge, just under half a tank. I had no money, no job, and nowhere to go. My friends were their friends. My life was their life. Except for one. My fingers, shaking, scrolled through my contacts to a name I had not called in 15 years. The one person on earth who hated the Prescotts more than I suddenly did. I pressed the call button. I had to go to Somerville. I had to go to my Aunt Claudia. I drove the Audi until the low fuel light pinged, then parked it on a dark side street 4 blocks away from the address. I walked, the silk of my gown dragging on the gritty pavement, the cardboard box heavy in my arms. Somerville. This was the working-class heart of Boston, a world I had not set foot in since I was a teenager. Claudia's apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a sagging brick building that smelled of stale cigarettes and boiled cabbage. The contrast to the Prescott Towers marble lobby was so violent it made me dizzy. I knocked, my knuckles feeling bruised. The door chain rattled, and the door opened a few inches. A pair of sharp, suspicious eyes peered out. Eliza. "Aunt Claudia," I whispered, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. I need help." The chain slid. The door opened. My Aunt Claudia looked exactly as I remembered her from my mother's funeral 15 years ago, wiry, tough, with deep lines etched around her mouth and eyes that missed nothing. She wore flannel pajama pants and a faded sweatshirt. Her small apartment was chaos stacks of books, old newspapers, half-finished projects on a sewing table. She looked at my emerald gown, the tear at the hem, my tear-streaked face, and the banker's box. She showed no surprise, no pity. She just stepped back, Well, she said, her voice a low gravel. Get in. You're letting the heat out. I stumbled inside, setting the box down. So, Claudia said, lighting a cigarette and ignoring my gasp of protest. The Prescott snakes finally bit the hand that fed them. I just stared at her, the smoke burning my eyes. What? What do you mean you knew this would happen? Knew. She let out a short, harsh laugh. Child, I knew this would happen the day your mother died. I am just surprised it took them this long to get tired of you. Mark divorced me, tonight, at the gala. He gave Sophia my job. He gave her my house. The words sounded insane even as I said them. Your house. Claudia's gaze sharpened. You mean their house. It was never yours. You were never one of them, Eliza. You were just their most valuable asset. I do not understand, I pleaded, the adrenaline finally crashing, leaving me weak. Of course you do not. You bought the fairy tale. You wanted to. Claudia took a long drag from her cigarette. You think Arthur Prescott built that empire Arthur could not design a straight line. He was a salesman, a con artist in a good suit. She pointed a sharp finger at me. Your mother, Eleanor Grant. She was the architect. She was the genius. Prescott Heritage Properties was Prescott and Grant for exactly 6 months, back before you were born. My mind reeled. I had no memory of this. That is not true. My mother was a small-scale residential architect. She was, after Arthur got done with her, Claudia snapped. He was the salesman. She was the talent. They were partners. And when she drew up the plans for the first big tower, he found a loophole, pushed her out, and built his heritage on her stolen designs. He took everything, every building you admire, every award he ever won. That was Eleanor's mind. I sank onto a stack of magazines, the silk dress pooling around me. No, he would not. He did. And then, 20 years later, you walk in. His son's brilliant, beautiful girlfriend, overflowing with the one thing he could never buy your mother's talent. You were not a daughter-in-law, Eliza. You were an acquisition. It was Arthur's final insult. He did not just steal Eleanor's legacy. He got her daughter to legitimize it for him. The world was tilting. My entire life, my marriage, my career, it was all a lie. A calculated corporate assimilation. Claudia crushed her cigarette out in a chipped saucer. Her expression softened, just slightly. She was so proud of your talent, but she was terrified of your ambition. She was afraid you would get too close to them. Why did not you tell me? My voice was a broken whisper. You were 20. You were in love. You would not have believed me. You chose them over me. Remember, she was right. I had cut Claudia out, seeing her as bitter and angry, a stain on the pristine future Mark and I were building. Claudia went to an old roll-top desk, dug in a drawer, and pulled out a single, old-fashioned key on a simple metal ring. It was not a house key. Your mother knew this day might come, Claudia said quietly. She knew what they were capable of. She left you something, an insurance policy. She dropped the heavy, cold key into my palm. What is this? A storage unit. Out in Revere. Unit 14B. I looked at the key. A small, tangible piece of a past I never knew. Hope, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my despair. Leverage. Claudia grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes were dark with a memory I could not understand. Listen to me, Eliza. What is in that locker is not just leverage. It is not just about the business. She leaned closer, and her voice dropped to a deadly serious whisper. It is why your mother died. Claudia had given me $20 for a cab. I did not take one. I walked to the nearest subway station, a ghost in a dirty gown, and took the blue line to Revere, hiding in the corner of the car. I ditched the Audi keys in a trash can. It was 4 a.m. when I finally reached the storage facility. a grim, sprawling complex of corrugated steel buildings near the highway. The air smelled of salt from the nearby marsh and diesel fumes. The night manager, half asleep in a brightly lit booth, barely looked at me as I signed the late access log. He just buzzed me through the rattling chain-link gate. I found the row, Unit 14B. The metal door was cold and streaked with rust. The old key slid into the lock with a gritty sound. I had to put my shoulder into it. But the lock clicked open. I grabbed the handle and hauled the groaning metal door upward. The air that rolled out was not just musty. It was heavy, thick with the smell of old paper, mildew, and time. It was the smell of a tomb. It was not a storage unit. It was an office. A metal desk, a high-backed drafting chair, filing cabinets lining one wall, and rolled-up blueprints, dozens of them, stacked in cubbies like ancient scrolls. It was my mother's entire professional life, packed away and forgotten. I walked inside, my footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. I unrolled the first blueprint. It was the Beacon Tower, the building that had put Prescott Heritage on the map. I knew these plans. I had studied them in college as a masterpiece of neo-modern design, and there, in the bottom right corner, was the signature block. In elegant, precise script, Architect Eleanor Grant. It was slashed through with a thick black marker. Beside it, written in Arthur's arrogant, sloppy hand, A. Prescott. I unrolled another, the Merchant's Bank. The same thing. Eleanor's name, crossed out. Arthur's, scrawled over it. Claudia was telling the truth. My entire career had been spent worshiping the man who had erased my mother. My eyes fell on a heavy, old-fashioned safe in the corner, painted an ugly government green. It was locked. I frantically searched the desk. No combination. I pulled open the drawers. Old pens, T-squares, drafting tools. Nothing. I looked around the small, cramped space, my heart hammering. My gaze landed on the only personal item in the room, a small silver-framed photograph on the desk. It was me, at about 6 years old, sitting on my mother's lap at a drafting table just like this one. She was smiling, her arm around me. I picked it up. It was heavy. I turned it over. Taped to the cardboard backing was a small, folded piece of paper. My hands were shaking so badly I almost tore it. I unfolded it. 6 numbers. Not a birthday. A date. 10/22. The day this storage unit was leased. I knelt in front of the safe, my silk dress tearing on the concrete. I spun the heavy dial. Right, left, right. The tumblers clicked. I pulled the heavy handle. The door hissed open. My pulse was pounding in my throat. I expected cash. Gold. Something I could use to survive. The safe was nearly empty. There was no money. Just 3 bulky, old-style hard drives and a single, small, black leather-bound ledger, the kind an accountant would use. My disappointment was a physical pain. I picked up the ledger. It felt heavy. I opened it to the first page. It was full of my mother's meticulous, architectural handwriting. Columns and dates, next to project codes. Project Alpha, Titan Steel, consulting fee, $50,000. Project Gamma, Southie Concrete, material overage, $75,000. I was not an accountant, but I had managed the budgets for Willow Creek. These were not fees. They were kickbacks. These were not overages. This was laundered money. It was a perfect, detailed, undeniable record of how Arthur Prescott had financed his entire empire, project by project, bribe by bribe. This was not just fraud. This was a criminal enterprise. My fingers traced her neat script. She had been building a case. I turned to the last page. Clipped to the inside of the back cover was another document, folded into quarters. It was old, the paper thick and watermarked. A red notary seal was stamped at the bottom. It was titled Articles of Partnership. I read the names Arthur Prescott and Eleanor Grant. My eyes flew down the page, scanning the legal text, until I found the clause. The partners herein shall hold equal ownership, liability, and equity in the venture, described as 50% for Arthur Prescott and 50% for Eleanor Grant. 50%. I frantically searched the rest of the document. There was no dissolution clause, no buyout agreement. It had been signed, it had been notarized, and it had never, ever been legally terminated. My mother had not left me leverage. She had left me the company. I left the storage unit as the gray, watery light of dawn broke over the city. Claudia had given me a pair of her old jeans and a sweatshirt. The emerald gown, stained with grease and dirt, was crumpled in a dumpster 4 blocks away. I clutched the canvas bag containing the hard drives and the leather ledger. It was the heaviest thing I had ever held. The partnership agreement gave me a legal claim, a civil case that could drag on for years. But the ledger that was Arthur's entire criminal history in my mother's perfect script. I was an architect. I knew how to read blueprints. This was a blueprint for a RICO case, but the language was beyond me. I needed a translator. I needed a specialist. There was only one name, Ben Kincaid. I knew the story. Everyone at the executive level of Prescott Heritage knew it, though we never spoke of it. Kincaid had been the sharpest forensic accountant in Boston, hired about 5 years ago to audit a Prescott subsidiary. He got too close. He found things Arthur did not want found. Arthur's machine had mobilized overnight. Kincaid was publicly accused of professional misconduct, of trying to extort the company. He was ruined, disbarred, and disgraced before he ever had a chance to present his findings. He was a corporate ghost. I found him in a strip mall in Malden. The sign just said Kincaid Tax Services, crammed between a brightly lit laundromat and a pizza place. The office was a single room with peeling linoleum floors and a dying plant in the window. A man sat behind a metal desk, drowning in stacks of 1099s and W-2s. He had the slumped shoulders of a defeated man and eyes that looked like they had not slept in years. He looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "We are appointment only," he said, his voice flat. "Mr. Kincaid." "That is what the sign says. My name is Eliza Grant. I used to work for Prescott Heritage." The name hit him like a jolt of electricity. He sat up straight, but the look he gave me was pure venom. He let out a short, bitter laugh. "A Prescott victim, is that what you are? Get in line. The line wraps around the block. I cannot help you. Nobody can." He turned back to his monitor. I stood there, waiting. He ignored me. "I do not have any money," I said. "Then you are definitely in the wrong place. Goodbye." "I am not here to hire you," I said, my voice low and steady. "I am here to offer you revenge." His fingers stopped typing. He swiveled in his chair, slowly, to face me. "What did you say?" "You heard me. This is not about getting my old life back. This is about taking down the man who destroyed yours. And mine." He stared at me, his eyes narrowing, searching for the trick. "Talk is cheap. You have no idea what you are up against." I did not argue. I opened the canvas bag. I left the hard drives inside, but I placed the small, black, leather-bound ledger on his desk. This was my mother's, Eleanor Grant. He looked at the name, then at me. Eleanor Grant, his original partner. Ben's professional curiosity twitched. He opened the cover. He scanned the first page. His cynical mask did not just crack. It dissolved. He turned a page, then another, his breathing becoming shallow. He looked up at me, his face pale, the exhaustion in his eyes replaced by a terrifying, focused intensity. "Where did you get this?" "In her private storage, where it has been for 20 years. He stood up, walked to the front door, and locked the deadbolt. He pulled the blinds. He came back to the desk, his hands almost trembling as he touched the book. "This is not just fraud," he whispered, his voice vibrating. "The cross-project cost shifting, the consultant fees to phantom companies. This is textbook organized crime." "I know," I said. "And I have the offshore accounts he used to do it." I placed the 3 hard drives on the desk. His back room was a windowless, suffocating closet filled with humming servers. The air was hot and dry. For 3 days, we did not leave. We lived on stale coffee and pure, uncut adrenaline. He was a master. He worked through layers of encryption, bouncing our signal through so many proxies I lost count. "He is arrogant," Ben muttered, his eyes glued to the screen. He never thought anyone would find the original ledger. Without it, these accounts are just noise. But with it, he smiled. The first time I had seen it, it was not a pleasant smile. "With this, we have a Rosetta Stone." We worked in paranoid silence, knowing that the man we were targeting did not just sue people. He erased them. Late on the 3rd night, Ben froze. "Eliza, come here. Now." I ran to his chair. He was pointing at a specific line of code, a recurring wire transfer, a massive one, moving once a month for the last 18 months. "What is it?" "It is a payment," he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "It is coded WC Maint." My blood went cold. "Willow Creek Maintenance." "Exactly. Millions of dollars. But it is not going to any of your vendors. This money is being washed." He traced it through 3 shell companies, and then he found the final destination, a private trust account in Liechtenstein. "Who does it belong to?" I whispered. Ben typed one last command. A name appeared on the screen. It was not Arthur's. It was not Mark's. "Sophia Prescott," he read. I sank against the wall. It hit me. The public firing. The gross misconduct. It was not just humiliation. It was a setup. They had used my passion project, my masterpiece, as a high-volume laundromat to wash millions into Sophia's personal account. "They were going to frame me," I said, the realization sucking the air from my lungs. When an audit finally happened, the money would be gone. Sophia would be clean, and the unstable, disgruntled architect who ran the project would be the only one left to take the fall. We had been too quiet. Ben had been tracing the offshore accounts for nearly a week, and I had been living in Claudia's spare room, a ghost in my own city. We were deep in the digital trenches, but we had forgotten we were fighting a man who owned the battlefield. Arthur must have felt the ground shifting. He must have sensed our digging. The counterattack did not come from a lawyer. It came from the front page of the Boston Chronicle. Claudia threw the newspaper down on her small kitchen table. It landed with a heavy, final thud. "You made the front page, kid." I looked down. My own face, a smiling, professional headshot from my old company bio, stared back at me. It was plastered above a massive, bold headline. "Gilded Cage Collapsed the Prescott Designer's Bitter Meltdown." My blood ran cold. The Chronicle was the city's most respected paper, a journalistic institution, and Arthur Prescott, as I well knew, sat on its board of directors. I read the first line, my hands shaking. "Eliza Grant, the former head of design at Prescott Heritage Properties and wife of heir Mark Prescott, has reportedly suffered a severe mental breakdown following her recent termination from the company." Charity case. That was the phrase that leapt out at me. The article, written by a senior investigative reporter, painted me as an unstable, emotionally fragile woman whom the benevolent Prescott family had generously employed for a decade, largely out of pity. "Sources close to the family," it continued, "describe a pattern of erratic behavior." I did not need to guess the source. I could hear Sophia's voice in every venomous word. She was becoming increasingly paranoid. An insider was quoted as saying, "She had these delusions." She started telling people her mother, who was a small-time architect, actually owned the company. It was sad. They were using my own family history, the truth I had just discovered, and twisting it into a symptom of insanity. But the real knife twist came in the 4th paragraph. The article directly addressed my abrupt termination, while the Prescott family has declined to comment on the specifics, citing privacy concerns. Sources allege that Grant's dismissal was the result of a month-long internal investigation. The probe reportedly uncovered significant financial irregularities and mismanagement of funds related to her final project, the restoration of Willow Creek Manor. I gasped, dropping the paper. They were using the exact crime they had committed the money laundering and pinning it on me. They had laid the groundwork with the gross misconduct email, and now they were finishing the job in the public square. I was not just a jilted wife. I was a paranoid, delusional, criminal employee who had been caught. Ben, who had come in from his back room, read the article over my shoulder, his face grim. They're not just discrediting you, Eliza. They're preemptively destroying any evidence you might bring forward. Who would believe a disgraced and unstable architect over Arthur Prescott? I read on, my stomach churning. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. But the final paragraph was the most devastating. It was the part that made me want to be sick. When reached for comment, Mark Prescott issued a brief, heartfelt statement. I read his words, my husband's words, printed for the entire city to see. This is a deeply painful and personal tragedy. I will always care for Eliza, and I truly hope she finds the mental health support she so desperately needs. My family and I ask for privacy during this difficult time. I tore the paper in half. The sound was sharp and violent in the small, quiet apartment. He had not just stabbed me in the back, he had done it while publicly expressing concern for my wound. He had positioned himself as the grieving, supportive husband, forced to watch his beloved wife descend into madness. They had perfectly and publicly established my motive. I was a scorned, unstable woman, fired for embezzlement, and now I was lashing out with crazy stories about secret ledgers and 50% ownership. They had not just discredited me. They had built a legal and public firewall. They had given themselves a complete insanity defense against any claim I could possibly make. The Chronicle article had done its job. We were paralyzed. The ledger was now the diary of a delusional woman. The offshore accounts were the evidence of my embezzlement. Ben was a disbarred accountant, and I was a crazy, jilted wife. We were a joke. "They've boxed us in," Ben said, his voice heavy with defeat. He had not slept. He was just staring at the wall in his tiny back office. "Any move we make, they'll just point to the Chronicle and laugh. We are dead in the water. Eliza." He was right. We had the truth. But Arthur owned the narrative. I left him there and went back to the storage unit. I did not know why. I just needed to be in the one place that felt real. I sat in my mother's dusty drafting chair, the silence of the concrete room pressing in on me. I felt hopeless. I had failed her. I had her proof. But I could not make anyone listen. My eyes fell on the silver-framed photo of me and my mother. I picked it up, my thumb tracing the outline of her face. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tired. I looked at what she was wearing, a simple blouse, and pinned to the collar, a small silver brooch. I squinted. It was not just a pin. It was a perfect, tiny replica of an architect's drafting compass. A memory, sharp and cold, surfaced from the depths of my mind. A small, velvet-covered box, the one the police had given to my Aunt Claudia, containing my mother's personal effects from the accident. I was 10. Claudia had given the box to me, saying, "This is all that is left." I remembered that pin. I had held it. I had been told the story my whole life. My mother had been working too hard. She was exhausted. She must have fallen asleep at the wheel. Her car went off the Mystic River Bridge. A tragic accident. I ran out of the storage unit. I ran back to Claudia's apartment. She was there, smoking at the kitchen table, the Chronicle article still sitting in pieces in the trash. "The box," I said, out of breath. "My mother's things. The box from the police. Do you still have it?" Claudia looked at me, her eyes unreadable. She did not say a word. She just stood up, went to the back of her cramped hall closet, and pulled down a small, faded, burgundy velvet box. She handed it to me. My hands trembled. I opened it. Inside, nestled on yellowed satin, was a single earring, a set of car keys, and the silver compass brooch. And I remembered something else. It had been broken. I picked it up. The pin on the back was snapped in half. The clasp bent at a violent angle, as if it had been ripped from her clothes. I turned it over, my fingers examining the cheap metal backing. The hinge of the broken pin was loose. Tucked beneath it, jammed into the hollow space behind the pin, was a tiny, tightly rolled-up cylinder of paper, no bigger than a grain of rice. "Ben," I whispered. I ran all the way back to his office. I laid the tiny scroll on his desk. He delicately unrolled it with a pair of tweezers. It was not a note. It was a receipt. A pawn ticket from Honest Abe's Pawn and Loan, a place that had been bulldozed a decade ago. The item, one Sony high-end video camera. The date stamped on it was October 12th, 20 years ago, the day before my mother died. The fog of defeat in Ben's eyes vanished, replaced by the electric fire I had seen when he first opened the ledger. "He is retired," Ben said, already typing. "The owner, Abe, I remember him. He moved to Florida. It took him 6 hours. 6 hours of cross-referencing public records, property deeds, and old business licenses. He finally found a number for an Abraham Rifkin in a retirement community in Naples." Ben put the call on speakerphone. "Mr. Rifkin. My name is Ben. I am an estate lawyer. I am handling the final effects of an Eleanor grant, and your shop's name came up on a receipt. We believe she pawned an item of significant personal value." The old man's voice was gravelly. "Eleanor Grant. That is a name I have not heard in, God, must be 20 years. The architect. Yeah, I remember her. Sad thing. What happened?" "The item was a Sony camera." Ben pushed, his voice smooth. Yeah, a high-8, top of the line back then. She said she needed cash fast. Said she would be back for it in 2 days. She never came." My heart stopped. "Mr. Rifkin," I interrupted, my voice tight. Do you still have it?" There was a long pause. "I am a pack rat, sweetheart. My wife always hated it. I digitized all my old inventory logs. I kept some of the unclaimed stuff in my garage. Hold on." We waited for 3 agonizing minutes, listening to the man shuffling and muttering on the other end. "Well, I will be," he said. "Still in the original box. It is right here." We paid him $2,000 to overnight it. The next afternoon, the package arrived. The camera was heavy, a relic, but the small high-8 tape was still inside. Ben had to buy a special deck on eBay and have it messengered from a different state. We plugged it in, we hit play. The first 40 minutes were just footage of building sites, panning shots of steel girders, close-ups of concrete pours, my mother's work. Then, the last file. The time code showed it was from the afternoon of October 12th, the day she pawned the camera. The image was grainy, shaky. The sound was muffled. The camera was low, angled up from a desk. It was my mother's office. We heard her voice, firm and clear. "I have the ledger, Arthur. I have the accounts. You will not steal my daughter's legacy the way you stole mine. I am filing the partnership suit tomorrow." Then, his voice, Arthur Prescott's, 20 years younger, but unmistakable. "You think you can just walk in here and threaten me?" He snarled. "I am not threatening, Arthur. I am informing." He stepped into the frame. He looked furious. He leaned over the desk, his face a mask of rage, getting so close to the hidden camera that his image distorted. "You file that lawsuit, Eleanor," he hissed, his voice a low, terrifying promise. "And I will stop you. I will stop you permanently. You understand me." The tape went to static. Ben and I stared at the screen. The silence in the room absolute. The hiss of the tape was the only sound in the room, but I could still hear his voice. "I will stop you permanently." Ben was the first to speak, his voice a cold, Hard whisper. That is not motive, Eliza. That is a confession. The Chronicle article. My public branding as an unstable, criminal-minded wreck suddenly made perfect, terrifying sense. Arthur had not just been building a defense against a civil suit. He had been preemptively discrediting a murder accusation. They own the Boston police, I said, my voice numb. We walk into the local precinct. That tape vanishes, and we are arrested for slandering him. We are not going to the local police, Ben said. He was already moving, pulling a brand-new, shrink-wrapped burner phone from a locked desk drawer. Arthur owns the city. He does not own the federal government. When they were railroading me 5 years ago, I made a contact. A guy in the Economic Crimes Unit at the FBI. He was furious when his case against Prescott got shut down by political pressure. He has been waiting. We did not just have separate pieces of evidence anymore. We had the whole horrifying story, a perfect, undeniable package. Ben laid them out on his desk. The original partnership agreement, 50%, that is the civil claim. I put down the ledger. The kickbacks and phantom consultant fees, that is the racketeering and financial fraud case. Ben added the hard drives. The Willow Creek money, that is the money laundering case that links directly to Sophia. Finally, I placed the high 8 tape on the pile. And that, I said, my voice shaking, is the homicide case. Ben made the call. It was brief. It is Kincaid. I have him. I have all of it. The original fraud, the new stuff, and the motive for the Eleanor Grant murder. This is not a guess. This is a package. Why, we met the agent 2 hours later in a generic sandwich shop downtown. He looked exhausted, skeptical, and angry. We sat in a back booth. We did not hand anything over. We just opened the laptop. We showed him the video first. He watched it, his expression hardening. He watched it a second time, leaning in. Then he read the first 2 pages of the ledger. He compared the dates to the partnership agreement. He did not speak for a full minute. I will need all of it, he said finally, his voice flat. You will get all of it, Ben said. When we have your guarantee that this is not going to be buried, you have it, the agent said. He is a high priority target. We just never had a clean shot. This is a cannon. The next 36 hours were the loudest silence I have ever lived through. We hid at Claudia's. We did not sleep. We just watched the local news, waiting. The dam did not crack. It exploded. At 10:17 in the morning, a breaking news banner flashed across the screen. Federal agents executing a warrant at Prescott Tower. Within an hour. It was the only story in the country. The collapse was instantaneous. Live helicopter footage showed Arthur Prescott, the untouchable titan of Boston, being walked out of his marble lobby in his shirt sleeves, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked gray, old, and bewildered. The charges were read live on air. Multiple counts of wire fraud, racketeering, conspiracy. And then the words that made me collapse into a chair. And suspicion of foul play in the 20-year-old death of his former business partner, Eleanor Grant. They said her name. After 20 years of being erased, they said my mother's name. The market reaction was nuclear. The New York Stock Exchange halted trading on Prescott Heritage properties. When it reopened, it was a feeding frenzy. The stock did not just dip, it evaporated. The entire empire, built on my mother's stolen genius and funded by kickbacks, was worth $0 by the end of the day. The U.S. government, armed with the ledger and the offshore accounts, froze every asset, the company, the subsidiary holdings, the private accounts, the art, the cars, and, of course, the house. Willow Creek Manor, Sophia's housewarming gift, was seized by federal marshals and listed for immediate public auction as part of the bankruptcy liquidation. I waited all day for the second set of handcuffs. For Mark. For Sophia. The news never came. That night, Ben got a text from his FBI contact. What about them? I demanded. Sophia and the money laundering Mark and the joint account. Ben read the text, his face grim. They were brought in, questioned for hours, but they were released. Released. I felt sick. They get away with it. No, Ben said, looking up from the phone, a strange, dark smile on his face. Arthur was a meticulous criminal, but he was also an arrogant patriarch. He kept them clean. The millions he funneled to Sophia, it was legally structured as a gift from a parent. The money Mark stole from your account, it was legally a joint account, not a crime. Just monstrous. So they are free, I whispered, the injustice burning in my throat. They are free, Ben confirmed. And they have absolutely nothing. Their trust funds, their penthouses, their credit cards. It was all tied to the corporate accounts. It is all frozen. It is all gone. They were not arrested. They were just released onto the street with nothing but the clothes they were wearing and the most toxic last name in the city. The fall of the House of Prescott was not a quiet affair. It was the only story in Boston for weeks. The city was addicted to the scandal. Arthur was in federal lockup, awaiting a trial that would be a mere formality. The empire was in ruins, its assets being carved up and cataloged by bankruptcy lawyers. Ben and I worked from a new, clean, and secure office. My mother's partnership agreement had been authenticated by the courts. It was ironclad. This meant that after the government took its share, I was not just a claimant in the bankruptcy. I was the primary creditor, entitled to 50% of whatever was left of the liquidated assets. It was going to be a staggering sum of money, a fortune. The final liquidation schedule is set, Ben told me one morning, sliding a document across my new desk. It all goes up for auction, the cars, the art, the furniture, and the house. Willow Creek, I said, the name tasting like ash. Mark and Sophia are not in jail, Ben continued, but they are desperate. They are pariahs. No bank will touch them, but they are still Prescott's. They are still trying to scheme. What are they doing? They found a new shark, Ben said. A vulture investor named Silas Thorne. Thorne hated Arthur for decades, claims Arthur screwed him on a deal back in the 90s. He is backing them. He sees an opportunity to pick the Prescott corpse clean for pennies on the dollar. I knew what he meant. They want the house. It is all they have left, Ben said. Their plan is to buy Willow Creek at auction for next to nothing. Spin some story to the press about rebuilding the family legacy. Rising from the ashes. They need it for sympathy. They need it to stay relevant. They think it is their comeback. They think I will just let them have it, I said, my voice quiet. The day of the auction was cold and bright. It was not held at a private gallery. The federal government, in a move of pure symbolic power, held it on the front steps of the Moakley courthouse, the very place Arthur's fate was being sealed. A crowd had gathered reporters, onlookers, and the city's bottom feeders, all hoping for a bargain. I saw them immediately, Mark and Sophia. They stood slightly apart from the crowd, next to a man in an expensive suit who radiated pure opportunism, Silas Thorne. Mark looked thinner, haunted, but he still wore the mask of Prescott arrogance. Sophia's face was a hard, bitter mask, her designer clothes replaced by something less impressive but still expensive. They were damaged, but they were not broken. They saw me. I was standing alone at the back of the crowd, dressed in a simple black coat. I had come from nothing, and I was back in nothing. They did not see a creditor. They saw the woman they had thrown out in a ball gown. Sophia leaned over to Mark. He looked at me, and he sneered, a small, dismissive curl of the lip. Sophia just smirked, a look that said, "You are still just the help." The auctioneer, a fast-talking man with a voice like a foghorn, began. Lot 1, a collection of artwork. Lot 2, a fleet of vehicles. Then, he got to the main event. And now, Lot 27, the property known as Willow Creek Manor, a historic restoration, fully completed. Bidding will start at $1 million. Thorne's hand shot up. $1 million. Another bidder, a developer, called 1.52 million. Thorne snapped before the auctioneer could even acknowledge the last bid. The developer countered 2.2, 3 million. Thorne shouted, his voice flat. He was not here to bargain. He was here to crush. The developer shook his head and stepped back. The crowd murmured. $3 million was a steal, but Thorne's aggression made it clear he would not be outbid. The auctioneer scanned the crowd. $3 million. Do I hear 3.13 million going once? Mark and Sophia were practically vibrating. They were looking at the house, their salvation. Going twice. Sophia turned her head. She found me in the crowd again. She held my gaze, and I could read the words she mouthed, a silent, final twist of the knife. My house. Sold. The auctioneer was about to say. I did not raise my hand. I did not move. I just stood at the back of the crowd, my face calm, and held my phone to my ear. I had not bid on a single thing all day. The auction stalled. Silas Thorne's bid of $3.5 million hung in the cold air, a predatory offer for a property worth 5 times that. The auctioneer, eager to close the deal, scanned the crowd. 3.5 million, a magnificent property. Do I hear 3.5 million going once? Mark and Sophia were locked in a tight, triumphant embrace. They had done it. They had survived. They were about to snatch their legacy back from the flames for pennies on the dollar. $3.5 million, going twice. Sophia turned, her eyes, filled with a familiar reptilian malice, found me at the back of the crowd. She smiled, a slow, condescending smile, and then she mouthed the words, a final, public humiliation. My house. The auctioneer raised his gavel. And sold, for 3. I raised my hand. I did not shout. I did not even look at the auctioneer. I just lifted my hand, my phone still pressed firmly to my ear, my gaze locked on the steps of the courthouse. The gavel stopped, frozen in mid-air. The auctioneer's head snapped toward me, his expression one of pure annoyance. Ma'am, the bidding is concluded. I apologize, I said, my voice clear and calm, carrying easily in the sudden, absolute silence. I have a phone bidder who was disconnected. They are back on the line now. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Silas Thorne turned, his face purple with rage. Mark and Sophia looked like they had been struck by lightning. The auctioneer was legally bound. What? What is the bid? Ma'am. I looked past him, past the crowd, and settled my gaze directly on Mark. Then I looked at Sophia. I let the silence stretch for one long second. My client, I said, my voice like ice, bids $10 million. The sound that erupted from the crowd was a physical shockwave. 10 million. It was not a bid. It was an execution. It was an insultingly high number, far above market value. Silas Thorne let out a string of curses. This was not a bargain. This was a slaughter. He jabbed a finger at Mark, spit flying from his mouth, then turned and stormed away, disappearing into the crowd, his new partners forgotten. Mark and Sophia's faces were a picture of pure, unfiltered panic. They looked hollow. Mark was checking his phone, his hands shaking, but his backer was gone. Sophia was staring at me, her mouth open, the smirk finally, permanently, wiped from her face. They could not counter. They had nothing. They were nothing. The auctioneer, now beaming, did not hesitate. I have $10 million from the phone bidder. Do I hear 11? No sold. For $10 million, to the phone bidder. He slammed the gavel down. The sound was like a gunshot. It was over. On the steps of the courthouse, Mark and Sophia stood alone, two perfectly dressed statues in the center of their own ruin, publicly defeated. They owned nothing, not even the house I had poured my soul into. I lowered the phone from my ear and pressed end on a call that had never been connected. I did not look at them again. I put the phone in my pocket, turned my back on the life they had stolen, and walked away as the new anonymous owner of Willow Creek Manor. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from? Comment below and share your thoughts. I would love to connect. Please make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it some extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.